On today's WhereTraveler Podcast, our host Teresa Rodriguez talks with the New York executive editor for Where, Francis Lewis. He has a long and fruitful tenure with Where magazine, having contributed his take on New York City, one that is intimate and local, but influenced by the seasoning of rich travel adventures. He grew up all around the East Coast, spending summers on Long Island and the Jersey Shore. He attended boarding school in Connecticut at Westminster and earned a BA in English Lit at Middlebury College in Vermont. He spent a decade in Britain, earned a PhD in English Lit from the University of Edinburgh, and taught at the University of London Institute of Education before coming back to New York. He travels far and wide with neither an itinerary nor a camera, so that he can experience the sights, sounds, smells, and emotions of a place without agenda or impediment, taking them in fully and committing experiences instead to his mind and his soul. He's done it in presidential libraries and museums around the country and throughout Europe and the Middle East. He brings that color and texture to the way he experiences New York in articles on practically everything. From the Tony Awards to botanical gardens to the many museums and all the places to eat. That is really just scratching the surface. Today on the WhereTraveler Podcast, he shares some refreshingly rare insights on what we think is a well-explored city. Joining Teresa Rodriguez, please welcome New York Executive Editor, Francis Lewis.
You're listening to the WhereTraveler Podcast, the audio companion for WhereTraveler magazine in print and online. For more information, go to wheretraveler.com. And now, Teresa Rodriguez, Editor-in-Chief for WhereTraveler San Francisco.
Hi, this is Teresa Rodriguez, your hostess with WhereTraveler Podcast. Today, we have a special treat because we're going behind the scenes of Where magazine and in New York magazine with Francis Lewis, who is the editor of both magazines here in New York and has been doing this for the past, should I mention it?
I guess you have to.
30 years. That is epic. The fact that you've been in this industry for 30 years I think it's fantastic.
It's frightening, but fantastic, yes.
So
I've been lucky.
So thank you for welcoming us to your New York. I'm an West Coast girl, so coming to New York is a bit overwhelming to me. So what I would love for you to do is help us with, the travelers and visitors who come to visit New York, give them some tips on how to best navigate this.
Well, of course, Trace, as you know, Where magazine is the go-to guide for the first time and also the repeat visitor to New York City. New York is actually a very easy city to navigate now, and contrary to what people might hear, New Yorkers are very, very friendly, and they will help you if you get lost or lose your way. What to do in New York? That's always a question. To do everything. If you're a shopper, you come to the right place. If you're a sightseer, you've come to the right place. If you're a theater fan, well, there's no better place. Yeah. Maybe London. We're better than London.
I think we're better than London.
I think we're better than London. Yes, indeed. So, Teresa, do you have anything specific? What?
Yeah, so let's just talk about, we've got visitors who arrive here.
Right.
And, I think that our listeners are like, okay, we've just landed in our hotel. Mm-hmm. What's the first step? So I would say go downstairs and pick up a magazine.
Pick up a magazine because you'll find in the very front of the magazine Where New York this is, and also in New York. But Where New York has a calendar of events, which the editors have selected. It would be a full month's curated calendar.
Right.
Highly selective, but hoping to cover all the bases that Where magazine covers. Where magazine covers shopping, dining, entertainment, attractions, museums, art galleries. So I would go first to the calendar, find something that is happening in your time frame and see if that appeals to you. We also have a full set of listings in the back of the book which supplement the calendar. and will guide you. For example, dining. If you're going to be in Midtown, look for Midtown restaurants.
Oh, I see.
If you're going to be on the Upper East Side or Uptown, whether it be Upper East or Upper West, check out those listings and see if they're near where you're going to be, and also if the cuisine appeals to you. If you're interested, if you're a visitor from overseas, you might say, gee, what is American cooking?
Right.
Where can I go for American cooking? Or if you're from the Midwest and think, gee, I've never really had an authentic Chinese meal, where would I go for that in New York City, which is well known for its Chinatown, just as yours, San Francisco is. So I would consult Where magazine, first of all, the calendar and the listings.
I love it. And let's talk about some of your favorite things to do in New York. I mean, you've been here for quite a while.
I love to walk. New York is a walking city, and it's fairly easy to navigate if you're above 14th Street. Going north, because we're on a grid system. Fifth Avenue divides us in half. We have the east side, and then left of Fifth Avenue, I say left of Fifth Avenue, but it's west of Fifth Avenue, you have the west side. So it's very, very easy to navigate. You just, if I'm going to be between 48th and 49th Streets, you can easily find those. Below 14th Street, it's a little bit of a rabbit warren, and I live down there, but I still still get lost occasionally because the streets are all higgledy-piggledy and at different angles to each other. Subway travel is the fastest way to get around, and the subways are convenient. And I would also stop when I'm taking the subway to look around at the artworks that are in the subway. We have a Roy Lichtenstein wall of tiles in the Times Square 42nd Street station. William Wegman, the guy with the Weimaraner, I think I pronounced that correctly or incorrectly, it doesn't matter.
Those cute little dogs?
The dog.
Yes, you pronounced it proper. I knew what you were talking about.
And he's in a subway stop. He did some tiles for that. Look at the artwork around you, as well as the people, and the convenience of getting to the subway. I am most excited at this moment about Hudson Yards, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard about it. It's a big development on the west side of Manhattan, in Midtown, very, very close to the Hudson River. It's a commercial venture with shops. It's a residential. It's an office complex. It's an arts complex. The centerpiece of the Hudson Yards is what we call the vessel. It's a sculptural, it looks to me like a flower pot with perforations. And the idea is that you climb up it.
What?
And you can take an elevator. It looks like a funicular, but it's much more fun to walk up.
Okay.
And it's great exercise, so wear your sneakers, as you should always wear, or your most comfortable shoes, which you should always do in New York. And as you go up the vessel, you can go either straight up or you can go in a circular twisting path, and you'll be taking photos, photo ops galore. And
what are the Crossroads? So we know it's on the west side.
I would take the 7 train. It's in the 30s, so it's about between West 34th Street and West 30th Street. Probably around 10th Avenue.
Okay.
And the beauty part of the Hudson Yards, apart from the shops, we have our first Neiman Marcus store in Manhattan.
Really?
First ever Neiman Marcus is in Hudson Yard shops. There are restaurants. I went recently for breakfast at Spanish Diner, which is in the complex. The beauty part is that the High Line, another attraction in New York City, ends at Hudson Yards. Its northern extremity is at Hudson Yards, and you can walk the High Line down to the Meatpacking District and the Whitney Museum of American Art.
Wow. Okay, let's tell our listeners about the High Line, because if they don't know what it is, I think this is such a exciting.
The High Line has proven to be an enormous attraction, and who would have thought it was a former elevated rail yard for freight trains that ran along 10th Avenue for several blocks, about 20 blocks. Mm-hmm. It became derelict, because freight trains no longer passed along it, overgrown with weeds. And somebody had the foresight, and I don't want to say it was the designer Diana von Furstenberg, but I believe she is very heavily involved in the High Line, she and her husband, Barry Diller. Millions of dollars were donated. The thing became, they said, we're going to renovate this thing. Rather than tear it down, which is typical New York, you don't like something, tear it down, we'll put something new in its place. No, let's see if we can preserve this and make it a public promenade and park. And I might be wrong, I probably am, but I think it might be the only promenade and park like it in the world. Yeah. Elevated, fairly narrow, but as you walk along it, you will see some of the most interesting architecture in New York City as you walk north, because a lot of the most interesting architecture at the moment is residential buildings.
Really?
So as you're walking on the High Line, you will see these very tempting looking co-ops and condos and think, gee, I wouldn't mind living there. One of them, of course, is Zahi Hadid's building. I believe the penthouse is still available for purchase. I think the price may have been reduced, and it may be around $40 million. But it's a triplex. Okay. But it's kind of brought the city together and the visitors in that people just love strolling on this promenade, where there are plantings, seasonal plantings. There's public artworks on view.
And you don't have to worry about traffic, right? Because
no traffic, because you're above the traffic.
Right.
The traffic is below you. And if you're walking north, to your left is the Hudson River. You'll take some snapshots of that, post them on Instagram. And to your east, the Empire State Building and the skyline.
Right.
It's a side of New York that you probably wouldn't have imagined exists.
It seems very peaceful.
It's very peaceful, except it can get crowded.
Okay.
But it's open at 7 a.m., and in the summertime it's open, I believe, till at least 10 or 11 at night.
Now, is it just pedestrians?
Just pedestrian. There are no vehicles allowed. No.
And how about animals?
Oh, sure. You can walk your dog.
Okay.
If you're traveling with your dog, yes, indeed. Yeah.
I find that New York is a very dog-friendly city.
New Yorkers love their dogs, yes, indeed. I can't imagine keeping one myself in the city, but New York is a dog-friendly city, yeah. And if you go to an outdoor cafe, you'll see dogs as well. There are a lot of places, of course, where they can't go, but yes, we love our dogs. And also it's in New York, because, you can live in New York in an apartment next to someone for 20 years, and you may not even know that person's name, and you may not talk. I mean, New York's a friendly city, but it's a city where you can be alone. New Yorkers use their dogs oftentimes to meet people.
There you go.
When they're walking dogs or going to the dog park or the dog run, they will strike up a conversation, and who knows what happens after that.
Exactly. So I want to ask you about some of your favorite places.
I'm Teresa Rodriguez, Editor-in-Chief of Where San Francisco, and you're listening to WhereTraveler Podcast, where we love to talk about anything related to travel. For more information about this episode, as well as WhereTraveler, be sure to check out WhereTraveler.com.
So I want to ask you about some of your favorite places. Do you have a favorite deli in New York?
A favorite deli? I used to like the Carnegie Deli, but I'm afraid the Carnegie Deli has gone the way of all flesh. But Syrah. But of course, Katz's Deli is a classic down in the Lower East Side.
And what was that deli?
Katz's.
Okay.
I might be the oldest deli in the city, but that's where you go for the classic deli food. A place uptown, midtown. It's from Brooklyn, but it's in the theater district. It's not really a deli, but it serves that kind of New York food: corned beef, pastrami, cheesecake. Would be Junior's. Junior's is world renowned for it. Well, not world renowned. Everything in New York is world renowned. But it's famous for its cheesecake. And if you can get through your matzo ball soup, your pastrami sandwich, and still have room for the cheesecake, you're doing well.
And do the cheesecake?
Oh, the cheesecake is fabulous. Either plain or you could have, with toppings, strawberries, whatever.
Okay.
So save room.
I'm salivating. What is your favorite Italian restaurant?
Italian restaurant, I've got to say, I love Patsy's. Patsy's is an institution. I think it's about 80 years old. It's a family restaurant.
I think 3 generations.
3 generations, and they are the nicest people in the world. Of course, it was Frank Sinatra's favorite restaurant in the city. Frank Sinatra and Rosemary Clooney. And Frank, I believe, would have a table upstairs. But it's the kind of place that people go back to because they're Patsy. They just embrace you. The family embraces you. It's Neapolitan cuisine, I believe. The red sauce Italian cuisine of the classic.
And where is it located in the city?
It's at the northern end of the theater district, so I'd say it's about below 57th Street.
Okay.
So it's in about 55th. Convenient for theater.
Okay.
Going pre-theater.
Well, let's talk about theater. Do you have a favorite production that's going on right now?
Oh, at the moment, yes, my most favorite new play. Let's talk about Broadway plays come and they go. My favorite play of the moment is a play called Ink, I-N-K, and it's about a newspaper in London, The Sun, and how it was bought by Rupert Murdoch. It's based on a true story. Bought by Murdoch. It was failing. He brought it to success in 1 year. That show's closing July 7th, so
get out
we
there.
won't talk too much about that, except that it was the show this season that really excited me the most. You cannot go wrong, ever, with Phantom of the Opera.
Oh, yes, Phantom.
Now, I saw that 30, maybe 31 years ago when it first opened in New York. It's still playing. I saw it just a few years ago, 2 years ago. It is as fresh and as polished and as well produced today as it was 30 years ago. If you've never seen a Broadway show and you want to know what Broadway is capable of, spectacle, excitement, Phantom. Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that because I do think that especially when you go down to Times Square and you're in the theater district, it's so overwhelming.
It is. There's
so many lights, bright lights, and this play's going on and that. And how do you choose? So I like that curated.
And I think even young people, I'm not saying toddlers would appreciate it, but I think if it's a child, preteens, first Broadway show, because you always remember your first Broadway show. I do. I mean, you keep the playbill, the excitement of going to the theater for the first time. You feel like a grown-up. That energy before the curtain. There are always a few minutes before the curtain goes up when things kind of settle down and your anticipation is at its highest.
Yeah.
And either be the overture or the lights dimming and the curtains up, and you're in a different world altogether.
Oh, I just got chills thinking about that. It is so true.
Certainly for kids, The Lion King.
Yes, The Lion King.
Any of the Disney productions that are on at the moment, and this is live theater we're talking about. So Aladdin, I know the film of Aladdin just came out, the live action film, but nothing is like seeing it.
That's true.
In the theater.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And let's talk about opera. How's opera here in New York?
Opera is still going on. There's a new music director who I think is trying to bring in new audiences. And one way to do that is to bring in Broadway directors. We have great mechanics at the Metropolitan Opera. It's extraordinary. There's going to be a new production of Porgy and Bess at the Metropolitan Opera. I don't believe there's been a production of Porgy and Bess for a while. So starting in September, when the season picks up, season runs September through May. Porgy and Bess, lots of Puccini. New Yorkers love Puccini.
The drama.
And Franco Zeffirelli, the director, just died last week, but his production of Turandot, Puccini's Turandot, is one of my most favorite of all time, and it's still in the repertoire, and it will be on at the Metropolitan Opera next season, the 2019-2020 season. If you've never seen an opera, that is the grandest of the grand, with spectacle that practically reaches out into the audience. And it also has good tunes, in that Wagner can be, for me, very, very heavy going. Before you get to that melody that you remember, you have to go through, oh my God, maybe 3 hours. But Puccini is right away a very satisfactory experience. And Turandot, yes, indeed, or La Bohème, or any of the Puccinis that are coming up. So Metropolitan Opera, it's an experience. It's an experience that some people dress up still for the opera. You'll find in the boxes guys in tuxedos, women in long gowns. Rest of us come in jeans. And you can get day of tickets for the opera if you queue up, line up at the box office. I think you can get seats that haven't been sold for maybe $25.
Really? So where is this at?
This is up at Lincoln Center.
Okay.
So this is on the west side, about 64th Street. The Lincoln Center complex, which also has the Philharmonic, the New York City Ballet branch of the New York Public Library. There's a restaurant in the Metropolitan Opera if you want to make a grand evening of it.
Yes, let's make a
the grand tier. But what I like to do after a performance at Lincoln Center is go across the street to P.J. Clark's.
Okay.
For a pint of Guinness and a hamburger.
I love it. The juxtaposition.
Yes, absolutely.
Puccini to Guinness.
Yeah, that's New York.
It is New York. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Francis, can you tell us, do you have a favorite Indian food restaurant?
I do indeed. Utsav. It's in the theater district. It's between 6th and 7th Avenues, and I think it's about 4th, and this is where my geography gets hazy, but it's in the 40s.
Okay.
And it's right next door to the Roundabout Theater's off Broadway house. It's also open late. Now, some people prefer having dinner before the theater. I prefer having dinner after the theater. So Utsav is a good post-theater. It's just... The service is so accommodating, so friendly, and the food is absolutely top-notch. And they're open late after the theater.
And what was the name of it again?
Utsav, Utsav.
Okay, got it. I love it. All these Indian names, it's hard to pronounce.
I know.
At least it's not in Sanskrit.
And a theater district restaurant on Restaurant Row, and I believe that's 46th Street, that I am an enormous fan of, is Joe Allen. And Joe Allen has been around, I think, for about 60 years. And it's a real theater district hangout. You often see Broadway stars there having dinner. It's known for its posters on the walls. The posters are of shows that have failed on Broadway. Big time flops.
Like super flops.
Super flops.
I love it.
It's American comfort food. I invariably have iceberg wedge salad. I mean, we're talking
love it.
Vintage retro. And
meatloaf.
Meatloaf is fabulous, but also calf's liver.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not going to eat one of those.
All right. But you'd love the meatloaf.
I love meatloaf with some extra mashed potatoes and extra gravy.
That's the place to go. That's the place to go.
Especially on a day like this. Because, let's talk about going inside, because it's rainy right now in New York. Yeah. It's the summer and people are like, wait, I thought there was going to be sunshine. What do you recommend on a rainy day like this in New York?
Go to a museum.
Oh, tell us about your favorite museum.
I have several favorites. For the big museums, I like the Whitney Museum, which is down in the Meatpacking District. It's a brand new building. It's devoted exclusively to American art. The biennial is on now. And it's the most comfortable big museum. The galleries are enormous, spacious. The artworks are stupendous. But my most favorite museums are the small museums. Two in particular, the Frick Collection up on 71st Street, just off Fifth Avenue, and the Morgan Library, which is in the 30s on the east side on Madison. I like them because they're small. Mm-hmm. I like them because they're private. The Frick Collection is the collection of Henry Clay Frick, an industrialist from the turn of the last century. It's a mansion.
Oh my
gosh. So as you tour the rooms, I know this as a child, I used to imagine, gee, I could live in that room. You go into Mr. Frick's study and there are El Grecos, there are Bellinis, there are Rembrandts. And you can imagine what it must be like living with these old masters.
Could you imagine?
It's breathtaking and intimate, not overly crowded, and just a real New York experience. This limestone mansion on Fifth Avenue. The Morgan was J.P. Morgan's library. It's undergoing some renovation at the moment, but the quality of the exhibition, the rotating exhibitions at the Morgan, is stupendous. At the moment, there's a Maurice Sendak exhibition, his designs for opera and theater. There's a photography exhibition there. I'm trying to think what else there is. I just went the other night. Rotating exhibitions all the time.
Oh, fantastic.
A little restaurant in the museum.
Really? There's a restaurant?
There's a restaurant, the Morgan Dining Room. And I must say that some of the best gift shops in the city are in museums.
Fascinating.
The Morgan has a stupendous gift shop, whether it be for books or for knickknacks, usually related to their exhibitions that they've had there. The Frick also has a very fine gift shop. Metropolitan has everything from jewelry to china to books to whatever. So if you have some quick shopping to do and you're in a museum, and of course MoMA, how could I forget the Museum of Modern Art? Now, MoMA has just closed this past weekend, June 15th, for the reinstallation of its collection. It has new galleries, and they are rehanging the collection in a different way, and I'm not sure how it's going to be, but it won't be the same MoMA that we knew before June 15th. It reopens October 21st. But
So is it closed between now and October 20th?
Which is a daring thing to do, to close a major attraction such as that. But it's so important that they get the rehanging correct that they've decided to do that. The MoMA Design Store, the Museum of Modern Art Design Store, is one of the great shops in the city. It's on it's right across the street from the museum. Okay. It's on 53rd between 5th and 6th Avenues. And I dare anyone to go in there and not pick up something. I mean, whether it be a potato peeler, because everything is chosen by the store buyers for its design quality.
Oh, got it.
It's aesthetic quality. Even if it's just a rubber spatula, I have to have it.
I love it. I'm going. And how about your favorite bookstores in New York?
Beyond the Barnes & Noble. I mean, there's a great Barnes & Noble on Union Square, but let's put that aside because I think everybody knows Barnes & Noble, whether online or not. There's a shop down in Soho, McNally Jackson, which is an independent bookstore, and those are some of the best in the city now. Those people who have managed to survive the Amazon invasion and the Barnes & Noble, 3 Lives in Greenwich Village is great because you can go into that bookstore and the salespeople actually have read the books and can make recommendations. The Strand is another great bookstore just off Union Square.
What's the one that's like 18 miles of books? Is that the one?
That's the Strand. Now, they've cleaned up the Strand since I started going there. It used to be,
I don't know, like when you say clean up a bookstore, I mean, what do they do?
Well, maybe they've dusted and they've rearranged. But it's a browser's nirvana. I mean, you cannot go in there and not lose yourself in the stacks because there are it's almost like a library, and stack upon stack of books, in all manner of categories. You can also get some good buys there. Book reviewers often return their review copies to the Strand, so you can get it at that book at half price that might be full price elsewhere. But it's a great browser's market for all levels, and it's in the NYU, New York University area.
Okay, got it. Yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know if you knew this, but the publishing industry still works on consignment.
Yeah.
And it's one of the only industries where the publisher will send books to a bookstore, and if they're not sent back, the books will be returned to the publisher, and the publisher doesn't make any money. But here's a little unknown bit of info. I'm an author. I've written 2 books, but if you sign the book, they can't return the book. So what you do?
So you go to the bookstore and sign?
And then they'll put a sign by the author. They'll put an autograph. They'll put a big gold sticker saying autographed copy. And then they can't return the books to the publisher. Just a little bit of tidbit.
I didn't know that. No wonder. I just heard of an author who has just published a book, and he's been making the rounds, and he went to a bookstore and said, "Hey, I'm the author of this book. Do you want me to sign a few copies?" Now I know why.
Yeah, that's like
that's terrific
information. Like you go to bookstores and sign all your books. And, they're happy to have autographed copies, but they cannot return autographed copies.
That is terrific. And of course, as a book collector, an autographed copy is gold anyway.
Right.
To have
especially if that person becomes super duper famous.
Yeah. Even not. It's a personal touch.
It is.
The author actually touched the book that I'm holding in my hands. Yeah, it's terrific.
I always get excited about being in New York, the literary scene and, the authors who came from this area and the books that have been written about this area. Are there any books that you really particularly love that take place in New York?
Well, I'm now that you mentioned this summer, I have a stack of books by my bed, and one of the books, Henry James's New York Stories. So I've been dipping in those, and one of the most famous, of course, is Washington Square. And I have to say, my dentist, his office is on Washington Square, the north side of Washington Square. And I always get a thrill when I go to his office because, well, I like going to the dentist.
You're crazy.
I know, 3 times a year, but 3 times a year I get to go to Washington Square and imagine that I'm in a Henry James story. And of course, it's part of NYU, New York University now. It's a great hub for student life. But I would say Henry James is my most favorite New York author.
I love it. Yeah, that's fantastic. Is there any other little bits of advice or info that you want to share with our listeners?
I would say put on your most comfortable pair of shoes and get walking. That is the best way to experience New York, I think. I know you want to see everything, but with a copy of WhereTraveler New York in your pocket, because you can fold it up and take it with you, explore and don't get nervous if you seem to have lost your way. For me, the Empire State Building is my lodestar, I guess you could call it. If I can see the Empire State Building, I know, that's north, that's south, that's east, that's west.
Got it.
Certainly that's for Midtown. It helps guide me.
I love it. Well, Francis, thank you so much for your time. And
thank you, Teresa. I hope you have a great time in the city this time.
I get to play tourist, because I do what you do on the
West Coast.
On the West Coast. And I love I think that we have our dream jobs. I really do. I think that the fact that we have an opportunity to curate all this content and all of these experiences that come to us.
Yes, indeed.
I mean, it is hundreds a day that we get emails about do this, do this, do this, do this, and that we get to sit down and we get to guide our readers to what is by far the best.
I think it's quite a privileged position. You're absolutely right. I think I get 300 emails a day, and it's a matter of going through it because people are very anxious that other people know what's going on in the city. But we get to be those curators that, based on our knowledge of the city, because we live in the city that we write about and edit, what we think are the most valuable things for people to experience.
And I think what you just said is a really good point, especially about the WhereTraveler brand, is that it is local. It's local writers.
Yeah.
It's people who live in the cities that are writing about the cities. It is people that are on the streets on a daily basis. They're the ones that are going to the cafes, the restaurants, the bookstores, the openings, the theater, and they really, we're getting firsthand advice and firsthand experience from the people that we work with.
That's what the Where brand always prided itself on, that we're in the city, we know what's going on, you can trust us and rely upon us for good, solid information.
Yeah, and I think we're pretty lucky.
I think we are too. Here's to 30 more years.
To 30 more years. Once again, I'm with Francis Lewis, the editor of Where in New York City and also in New York. Francis, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Teresa.
This is Teresa Rodriguez, WhereTraveler Podcast. You can find out about where to go and what to do in New York City. Visit WhereTraveler.com. Thank you, listeners, for joining me. You've been listening to the WhereTraveler Podcast, hosted by me, Teresa Rodriguez. This episode was produced and directed by Pete A. Turner, John Leon Guerrero, and Victoria Shepard. To listen to this podcast, find out more information about the crew, as well as WhereTraveler, visit WhereTraveler.com, your ultimate destination guide.